So when I first started Flavorman, all we did was create formulations for customers. They came to us with an idea, we created the beverage, and then we gave them a formulation. But that's really not a sustainable company, or a venture. So we started adding services organically as customers ask us to do quality control or production services or go to their first production or check the product afterwards. We started adding those services. So now we have what we call start through finish. So in other words, if you came to us and asked for any kind of a beverage, we'd work with you from start through the finish of your formulation, meaning we would create that formula and then we would do a scale up and create specifications. We would go to the first production with you to make sure that everything went correctly. And then after that, every time it was made, you'd send samples to us. We would check those. We do a lot of QC work in Louisville in our laboratory. And then if we did find a problem, we would talk to that contract manufacturer and do troubleshooting for you until we corrected the problem. Yeah, so we had a client come to Moonshine University because they wanted to open up their own distillery. And I'm not going to mention their name because we signed a confidentiality agreement with all of our clients and they're still current. So I won't mention their name. But they came to the Moonshine University Distillers course and they were all ready to buy some property and build a distillery. So one of the things we do in that distillers course is to teach people that you don't have to build a distillery just to come out with a brand or a product. We can actually develop a product for you and you become a brand owner and we find a contract manufacturer for you. And then you really are a marketer and a seller of a brand, but you don't have to own any real estate. This particular customer came to us and they were gung-ho on opening a distillery. And when they got here, they got to the sections where we teach them about being a brand owner versus a distillery owner. And they thought, that's really for us. So even during this course, they pivoted and they talked to us while they were at the course and said, we'd like to develop a ready-to-drink cocktail. So we set them up with some of the Flavorman folks just to talk about it. And we talked to them about all the services that we could do for them. So they gave us an idea. We could develop that product. We could, and it's a back and forth sort of process where they taste it and give us some feedback and then, we change it up. But we literally went from, and during that week, we literally went from their idea to showing them how we could develop the product. When they finally pick a formulation, we scale it up for production. We do shelf life studies. We talk to them about how we send our production people to their first manufacturing of their product to make sure that it's made right, that we do quality control, and even after that time, perhaps they have a problem and we troubleshoot that problem and we would use analytical services to help us correct that or to find out what the problem was. A really start through finish program that we have. And we work them through that and they decided to hire Flavorman to do that. Oftentimes when we start a project with the client, we sit down with them and ask them, what do you really want? So with this particular client, they knew they wanted a ready-to-drink cocktail. And we said, well, okay, there's lots of cocktails. Which of those do you want? And we listed off some for them because I wasn't sure when we spoke to them if they knew exactly what they wanted. So I spit out different cocktails, from margaritas to palomas to whiskey sours to, just about everything. I tried to think of a rum drink, a gin drink, gin and tonic. So we went through all of those with them and they had a vague idea of what they wanted. And then we asked them questions like, who's your consumer? So for instance, if we made a ready-to-drink cocktail 20 years ago, it would definitely be sweeter than the ready-to-drink cocktail that we make today, especially if their consumers are younger. So if they're going to go for the consumer that's a little bit older, we would have a cocktail that's a little bit sweeter. If it's for today, it would be less sweet. So, and we help them fill that in because the other thing is that depending on who their consumer is, what would be the cocktails that would appeal to that group of people? The cocktails that appeal to people my age are different than the ones that appeal to the 20 and 30 somethings. So we would talk them through that. And while doing that, we would talk to them about the kinds of flavors they want. Because if you wanted just a whiskey sour, we could make it so that it was heavy on lemon or lime or tangerine, or, there's all kinds of details. So we'd kind of work through all that. How sophisticated do you want your product? Are you going for something that's very sophisticated, using maybe a couple of unusual ingredients or flavors in your product that you can talk about in marketing? Or do you just want a gin and tonic? Bam. That's all you want. It's a simple gin and tonic. So we would talk about that, and that would all be based on their consumers. And we would also then go into what kind of packaging. Is this going to go into a glass bottle or a can? And if it's a can, what size? Because there's many different size cans now, and bottles the same way. Do you want ingredients in it that's going to cause us to somehow process the product through pasteurization? Because that would make a difference as well. The timing, what's your timing? People come to us all the time and they think that next month that they're going to be selling something. It takes 3 months, at least about 3 months. So, the timing is important. Where are you going to distribute your product at? Because if you're only going to distribute in the beginning on the East Coast, and maybe even in particular the Northeast Coast, we're going to help you find a contract manufacturer that's in that area. We don't want you manufacturing it in Southern California if you're only going to sell it in the Northeast, or vice versa. So those are the kinds of things we ask clients at the very beginning, get them on a path to the right direction. And of course, through the process, we make changes. So every project has a starting point. Oftentimes, the finished beverage isn't exactly like the client talked about at the beginning. So we ask them the sort of questions of, how sweet, how tart, what are the flavors you want, what's the packaging you want. And we start in the laboratory of sending them samples. Here's some samples to taste. And this particular client, they had 3 SKUs, all very different. One used a tequila base, one used a whiskey base, and one used a gin base. So we send them samples of products. They taste, give us feedback. We make changes, send them back. They give us feedback. It's kind of a loop until they get ready. And, all the things to consider, you think that should be easy, but, you've got sweetness, you've got tartness, the color of the product. Is it carbonated? Sometimes clients say they want something carbonated, and then they start tasting and they think, yeah, let's get rid of the carbonation. The alcohol level, is that the right level that you thought you wanted at the beginning, or do we want to make adjustments on that? What about the actual flavor? Is it too simple? Is it too complicated? Is it just not the right flavor? We make all of those kinds of changes, and it's things that people don't even think about. Well, what about that aftertaste? Does that flavor linger too long or not long enough? So once we get all of those things set, then we start talking about, hey, would you like to come in for a lab day just to put the final touches on it? We find lab days very helpful because you actually connect directly in person the client and the project leader who's actually been working on the project in our Flavorman lab the whole time. So we sit down in a room, we taste, it's one thing when you talk over the phone or even on a Zoom, but when you're right across from somebody and they taste something, just the look on their face, you get an idea of how they like it or how they don't like it. And, sometimes people don't know how to describe what they like or what they don't like. So it's easier to coach them while they're sitting right there, and maybe even go back in the lab, bring in another sample that's just a little bit different. Let them taste that. And then you can see if you know what they're saying, because what I might describe as very bitter or, any kind of a descriptor may not be the same way you describe bitter or that, but when we're together, we can figure that out. So lab days, we can really hone in on the final formulation. And oftentimes when our clients leave their lab day or lab days, sometimes they're here for 2 days, we're done. So with that part of the project. And then while they're here, we basically barrage them with Flavorman experts. We let them talk to the regulatory people so that they know the kinds of things that they are going to need on their label and the things they can leave off. Especially entrepreneurs, they put things on their label that's outlandish, and it's not allowed. So we help coach them and say, no, you can't do that, or you must have For instance, you must have how many fluid ounces are in any kind of a beverage. It's a must, and it must be on the label. So the regulatory people, we let them talk to. Then we have production services people come in and say, let them know, hey, I'm going to be at your first production. I'll be working with the contract manufacturer. If they've got any questions or they run into trouble, it's the first time for everybody except us, because we developed the product. We know how it should be made. So we'd be on site to help out, so that they would be able to meet that person. And it gives the client a lot of comfort and confidence and satisfaction to know somebody from Flavorman is going to be right there, looking out for me and my beverage. And so we make sure that they meet those people. We also have them talk to our QC people internally so that they know that the products that are made somewhere and sent here are going to be checked and rechecked to make sure that they're being made right. And if they're not, we're going to troubleshoot that and find out what the problem is, and we're going to solve that. It becomes very clear to the client is that Flavorman's success is directly tied to their success. If they fail, we fail, because we won't have a client anymore. We won't be able to make money. So we make sure that they know, and so we have them meet all of these people so that they realize all the people that are working behind the scenes, because generally they've only talked to one or two people at Flavorman, but they meet the whole team and they know, hey, they've got me at every step. So at that lab day, we finalize the details for the first production, things like, what's the timing? It's almost always unrealistic. They get their formulation and they want to go, can we do this next week? Or, it takes some time to order materials, to get a date for production at the production facility. What are your amounts? Are you doing 1,000 cases or 100,000 cases? That changes everything. So we'll work those out. And who attends that first production? We are firm believers that the owner of the brand should be at the first production, because they can see what they've done. And it brings a great source of pride. And we feel that when they go out and try to sell it to distributors, that they feel that pride and they're better salespeople and they can get it out there and get it distributed. So we encourage them to be at that first production. So one of the things we do very well at Flavorman, and it's very mysterious to the client, is the scale-up process. So what they see when they have a final formulation is a piece of paper that has a formulation, all the things that go in there, and the amounts. What they don't realize is you have to take that piece of paper and make it acceptable to a contract manufacturer, because we're working on 100 mils. That's a very small amount. And the contract manufacturer is going to make 1,000 cases or 5,000 cases. And we have to get it in their language. So it's almost like translating from English to Spanish or French, because oftentimes the contract manufacturer will work in kilograms, or they only want to work in pounds. And your formulation has milliliters and grams or pounds, or, they're all mixed up. It doesn't matter. So the scale up function that we do at Flavorman is very detailed. We have a whole team that works on that to make sure that formulation that we've created, that you've accepted, is then converted into a scale up formulation that we can take to a contract manufacturer. And along with that new formulation that's in the language of whatever contract manufacturer you're going to, it also contains specifications. So we have the QC team here working on specifications to make sure that that contract manufacturer knows what the sweetness level should be, and there's a specification for that. What's the tartness level, color, alcohol percentage? There's all of the aspects of your beverage that have to be sort of dictated and outlined for that contract manufacturer, and that's all part of the scale-up process, which is, it's complicated and again, it's mysterious to the client, and sometimes they don't even know we're doing it, but it has to be done, and it's an important part of the process. So I started by saying this is a start through finish process at Flavorman, and we've covered some of that today. And so I'm going to do another video where we actually follow through on this client. The client came to us from Moonshine University, pivoted to a ready to drink. We sent it to the laboratory and they start making formulations. The client finally picks a formulation. We scale it up We get it ready for production, and the client sets a production date. Now what happens?